Hello, and you are listening to Eco Justice Radio. We present environmental and climate stories from a social justice frame. We amplify community voices, broaden the reach of grassroots-based movements, and inspire action. My name is Jack Ite, and let's go on a wild ride into the wilderness of real life and real imagination. It's a venerable carnival of the animals out there. If you put your ear to the ground, you can hear them coming. Eco Justice Radio acknowledges that we recorded this show on the traditional territory of the Quechua and other Andean peoples in the place we call Urubamba, Peru. Welcome, I'm Jack Ite. On today's show, the music and traditions of Highland Peru, we feature a discussion with Rafo Nunjar Tovar, self-taught musician, composer, sound researcher, and instrument builder. Born on the Peruvian coast and raised by Andean grandparents, his artistic work explores the traditional music of Peru, the soundscape, and the relationship between sound, territory, and memory. Rafo Nunjar Tovar released Rupestre, his first studio album, entirely composed and performed by himself, focused on acoustic exploration, traditional instruments, and the creation of sound landscapes of Andean root, which we'll hear samples from on today's show. He's the founder and owner of the Museum of Traditional Instruments Pacha in Urubamba, a managing member of the festival Cordas y Sirenas, dedicated to research and visible rituals associated with stringed instruments and sirens in the Peruvian Andean South, and a founding member of Kukuy, an association focused on the collection and preservation of traditional songs from Cusco. In parallel, since 2012, he's been directing spaces and workshops linked to sound, listening, and collective exploration. Today we report from Peru, the third largest South American country, over twice the size of France. For perspective, Lima, the capital on the coastal ribbon, is the economic center of the country, where right now another right-wing dictatorial descendant Keiko Fujimori, her neoliberal free trade, Trump-aligned law and order with organized crime connections candidacy, looks to have overtaken an early lead by the moderate leftist Roberto Sanchez, thanks to votes coming in late from expatriated Peruvians in the U.S., strangely enough. Wow. They just showed up for their country that they used to care about, but now they live in Miami, which sounds like fraud, with assertions that U.S. Ambassador Bernie Navarro meddled in the election. Imagine doing that. A major mobilization against these results is underway in Lima, Arequipa, Puno, other places, but let's face facts. Alberto Fujimori is known for the crackdown on the Shining Path Maoist insurgency before his government collapsed in a mess of corruption and human rights abuses. His daughter is a three-time election loser, but for many reasons had her vote total inflated enough to pretend to win. It's up to the rest of us not to pretend to believe them. Yet the rest of the country lives under another form of indigenous self-government of the Sierra, averaging over 3,000 meters in altitude, 5,000 different communities where Spanish is the second language, people living on steep, rocky, deforested land at excessive density, many without traditional services, infrastructure, and maintained roads. Yet the Cusco region we're reporting from has sophisticated water and irrigation canal systems, managing running water drained from the high glaciers above that happen to be melting at rapid rates, with a pastoral and agricultural subsistence, grazing llama, alpacas, and sheep, weaving their clothes from wool and growing potatoes, cereals, and vegetables. There is tourism, there is mining, there is little crime, but people have learned to live without many of the conveniences and many of the headaches and expenses that we have in the States and other nations around. Highland Peru is not an easy place for an outsider to understand. The mountains rise in all directions, so it's easy to never know where you're headed. There are Spanish conquest monuments and Inca ruins in every direction as well, but many civilizations predated them, going back to 20,000 BC. Music and dance dominate this Andean heartland. The instruments, the quena and charango, and the costumes have their place and particular meaning in what seems almost constant festivities. So that's where we will begin, with musician and all-around social commentator, Rafo Nunjar. That was El Primer Amanecer by Rafo Nunjar. Okay, estamos aquí en Urubamba.
Hola, my name is Rafo Nunjar. I'm the owner of this small space, which is Accha Museum.
And could you explain a little bit what's going on in the museum and also your work? You're a musician, but you also have a lot of other skills.
Yeah.
Tell us about and understand.
I cook.
You're a cook. That's excellent.
Yeah, that's great. Well, this museum is a collection of traditional instruments that goes from pre-Columbian times until traditional contemporary instruments, mostly used in the Andean part and the Amazonian part. And I never had the intention to have a museum. Many years ago, I was a graphic designer. Then for an episode in my life, I turned to be a musician, a sound healer in a moment where sound healing was not a thing. But I got interest in researching about how sound can affect people, behavior, mood, emotions. And I found in traditional music a lot of elements to answer that. So I started collecting these musical instruments for my sound healing purposes. But then I got more inside the traditional music and more deep into it. And I got so into it that most of my occupation now has to do with research and with traditional music, and I'm no longer a graphic designer. Mm-hmm. And everything I do now mostly spins around music and sound.
Well, so traditional music, how were you able, we're going to show some of this stuff on the video version of this, but how were you able to, did you apprentice with the teacher? How were you able to learn about these traditions?
Well, back many years, I started playing in a group of traditional music called Sicuri, which belongs to the southeast part of Peru, in the border with Bolivia. And no, I didn't have a special skill, mainly because Sicuri is a very popular genre because everybody can play it. Like you can go from something very basic to things that are very complex. So I started playing there. I did have some musical background and it was very helpful, but it was way different to what we were doing. And then little by little I start like exploring other instruments. I think I had the very basic things with the sikuri, which are a type of pan pipes,
Okay.
and then I got with the flute, like many types of flutes. Then I got to the charango, which is a string small instrument, and that's the first time I had a teacher, a traditional teacher, and because wind instruments are very different and string instruments were more complex for me for understanding. So I was in need for a teacher. So, but now it's the instrument that I enjoy the most,
The
and
charango is a 10-string.
yeah. So and well, but the thing is, like with the years, as you know, I like to go to the traditional celebrations. Not only here, in many parts of the country, I've been. That's where I gather most of the instruments. That's where the music happens. Happens in many times, but especially in those moments, and not only what we see in the main celebration, but before it happens, there are rituals and there's a special music for that. And after, there are also rituals and special music for that. So what we see is in between. But what is also very interesting is to see what happens after and before, and that gives you even more context of what you see in a main celebration. So, and everything at the end is related to the weather, to the cycles of nature, to if the sun is distant or not, if we have rain or not, if it's dry, what kind of products do we have, and how is the communities are related to the weather. And if we think about it, like weather, it has to do with how our planet spins around the sun. So it's a very cosmic way of intertwining every aspect of humanity, and all of that is weaved by music here.
Yeah. So my experience, say in the latest one, is the Yuyaq. And so, what's your take on it? I've talked with a bunch of people about some of the details of the dances and things, but we didn't talk much about the music and maybe what. Okay, on the streets we hear a lot of band music and certain melodies that are similar to each other, but my understanding is there's multiple different musical contributions to the festivities. We went to some private houses where there was music playing in a very different and very more traditional way, and also maybe the original ways that these dances formed and what kind of instruments. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. You know, now traditional celebrations, music are mixed with more contemporary instruments, but they preserve the traditional melody. So when you hear it, this melody maybe 30, 40 years ago used to be played with another different kind of instruments, more traditional like flutes, like small drums, like snare drums, and still some like maybe the most traditional groups, they still preserve that. But even there are celebrations where in the same group they have like the large band with brass instruments, and they have the traditional group with the traditional instruments, but in different moments they play exactly the same melody. So the thing with the use of more modern contemporary instruments are because of two things. One of them is because there's been an inherited way of playing and in this structure of music because of military bands. Because back in the day, we were forced to do military service. And when people will go there, sometimes people will learn to play these instruments in the military bands. They will take this back to their communities and they will start playing with this new format. The other thing is that it's volume. And And that's why, because there is always a large competence, let's say, like before the celebrations, like in the town, sometimes people they go to where the Señor de Torrechayok is, and not only where he is in the church, sometimes they go to a mountain where the cross actually is, because it's also a symbiosis. So Señor de Torrechayok is actually it's a mountain. It's used to be Tantamarca, which is not so far from here, but now it's in Pumamarca, which is going up this street. They, I think like maybe 20 years ago they moved the cross there, but originally was closer. So sometimes the groups they go to pay respect to the mountain where the cross is, which is a blend. And we have to imagine that every group is taking the prayers of the community they are representing. So the way of taking these prayers to this mountain, to this Lord, is going and dancing. So, but sometimes a lot of them go at the same time. So, in order to ensure that the mountain or the Lord is gonna hear, we have to volume up the music. And sometimes, in order to do that, they change instruments and they don't play the quena or the traditional flutes. They play other instruments which have more volume.
Yeah.
So then becomes everything a cacophony, which I mean, in the beginning was kind of hard for me to enjoy all that. Now I really enjoy it. Like it has all the sense, but like we have to understand that it's not just they don't do things randomly. There's a purpose for that, and sometimes those things they just layer up one to another, and it's okay. So that's one of the things that it happens, and when people come down and it's a celebration here in the city, in the more urban context, it has some more order, but still sometimes the melodies they go one in top of the other. So that's some of the reasons why that happens.
Yeah. So you touched upon one thing I'm trying to get a clearer picture of is the prayer, the intentions, because I feel like the different types of dances, in a way, it portrays the entire landscape, the culture within it, the material culture or the needs or the tools or the things that people use to survive. There's the guerreros, there's the gobiernos, there's the playing around between the sexes, the male and female dances, there's beauty, so to me it sort of sets up this landscape vision of a way of life and also a history. And it's something new to me because in the culture that I come from, or the cultures that I come from, there's nothing exactly like that. But you can find in European societies these things. You just have to look a little harder. They didn't quite make it to the United States in ways. So, but the certain Catholic Church angle of things, what's your feeling about that? About, what's you kind of said it, but the purpose of these type of celebrations, and I know there's many others that, and they have specific, this is about the cross that was found up on the mountains that, was talking and, it had strong significance and brought down and created this temple, which is now here in Urubamba. But it's more than that as well. So.
I feel it has to do with the connection of human beings with the landscape, with the territory, and how we bond with the territory. Now it's a very nice place, but how about some hundreds of years ago where we didn't have this organization for having all these crops here, like for having all this food, when there was not all these water channels that we have now. So life was harder, but once you get to live with it and to organize things, nature in a certain way that can fulfill your needs, I think it's very natural that you feel grateful that you can live where you live. So I feel in a very strong part that it has to do with celebrate life. You know, like you are here, we have this, and we can enjoy it. We have issues like everybody,
Sure.
but at the end, we are in a good place to live. And I think that's the main reason in many parts to celebrate. Here, specifically, I think it's one of them. And I remember that a lot because my grandmother, Teresa, she used to be from the Andes. She was from the Andes, not Cusco. She was from Apurimac, which is another region north of here. And since I have reason until the last day she was alive, she will always talk about her land, her pigs, the animals in the farm. Like she will miss that so much. And when she passed, some years after, I came to the countryside to get to know this, and I stay here for many months to live. And after some months of living here, I felt so at peace with God, with me, with nature, and I said like that. This is why my grandma missed this so much. Like I did understand at that point, I think. So
Yeah.
and that's how I feel now, and that's how I think I understand people how they celebrate here, and they even have the conviction to live somewhere else, some other cities, sometimes some other countries, and they return for a specific date just to dance, to be with the community again, and that sense of commitment. It's something that when I was young I didn't understand, but now after some years I do understand why people commit so much with a place, with a community, with a tradition. It makes every sense, you know. And they celebrate many parts. That's what the dances tells us, you know. Some they come from the jungle, and there are ladies from the jungle. There are males from the jungle. There is one that is called Capacchunchu that talks
Yes,
about
yes.
how the Incas they colonized people in the jungle, and in their choreography there is a movement that you can see how they're doing it. Some other dances come from the highlands of the Andes, some come from the coast. Some are, there's one that's called Auca Chileno, which means enemy, Chilean enemy, because we were in a war with Chile
Yes.
in like 100 years ago. So there are many historic moments. And now, even when there is a lot of traditional dances, now people, they want to dance things from other parts of the country, which are very, where we have a lot of energy and are very visual, and sometimes are very spectacular in their costumes and the way they move and jump and dance. And I know a lot of people, I mean, I do want to dance also in a dance, and I do understand that everybody wants to be a part, you know. And there are places where people, like this feeling of dance is even harder than here. So
Harder, what do you mean?
like everybody wants to dance. Like even the police have their own group,
Yeah.
and sometimes the town is very pissed because the like houses got robbed those days because they know cops are dancing. So it's just it's a different logic, you know. It's something that goes beyond logic. I think it has to do with something very emotional. We are a very emotional part of the world, you know.
Yeah.
So that moves us very, very strongly. Yeah, I think that's a part that has to do with this.
You're listening to Eco Justice Radio, a listener-supported media outlet. Please consider making a donation to ensure that we can continue to provide socially and environmentally driven content. Donations can be made at ecojusticeradio.org or socal350.org. For an extended version of this interview, as well as other benefits, we encourage you to become a member of our Patreon at patreon.com/ecojusticeradio. Today, you're listening to The Music and Traditions of Highland Peru. I'm your host, Jack Ide, and we feature a discussion with Rafo Nunjar Tovar, self-taught musician, composer, sound researcher, and instrument builder. That was Rupestre by Rafo Nunjar. So, what I want to get a sense of, you were talking about how they've made it easy to live here in a lot of ways that maybe wasn't always that way. But I do find, like you reference the flowing water, which we can hear out. I don't know if you can hear it on the recording, but we hear it right outside the door, and every street has flowing water down from the highlands back, and water is disseminated throughout the community in a way which is really interesting. And this is not only this community, it's many other communities. And why do they call it the Sacred Valley?
Why they call it? You know, this name comes from very old times, and it's mainly because Cusco City, which used to be the capital of the Incan Empire, this was the place where all of their most of the food products will be produced here, because there's a lot of microclimates in a very diverse part of the valley. So there's a large amount of things that can be produced here in terms of food, vegetables, fibers, plants, medicine plants, llamas, alpacas. So most of the production here will go to feed Cusco City. And that was one of the reasons why it was called the Sacred Valley. The other main reason is this river, because it has...
Urubamba River.
Actually, it's called Vilcanota River.
Which is the
And
Milky
then-
Way. Is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay.
It goes parallel to the Milky Way in this month, in May. So
First, just the word again,
Vilcanota.
and that signifies the Milky Way. Am I correct?
I am not sure about that.
I heard that.
What I can tell you is that there's another name that sometimes people call it, which is Vilcamayo. And Vilcamayo, in the old Quechua, it could be called Wilcamayu. And Wilca means sacred, and Mayu means river. So it's sacred river.
Okay.
And one of the things why it was sacred is because it will go parallel to the Milky Way, which is more visible now. And also now that you say like the Urubamba River, if we go north, like if we take this river north, it will go one of the branches. It will go into the jungle where actually is born, and one of those branches goes deep into the Machigenga territory, which is a nation in the jungle, and that's where it's called High Urubamba, and it's a place with high diversity. But it's many days from here, but it's sacred because it comes from the jungle, but comes from the mountains also. So it's taking waters from many places. So that's one of the reasons why this place is so sacred. This is also a place with a lot of knowledge and wisdom. For instance, Chincheros, which is a community that also belongs to Urubamba, they are still very known for being incredible weavers, and they have a lot of knowledge in that. But also, I've heard from healers that back in the day, the most renowned healers they will come from Chinchero. I don't know if it's like that now, but I would say like maybe 60 years ago, it used to be like that. Like they were very recognized about that. So yeah, so it has to do with that. Also, if you follow this river, and that's something that is also very sacred about it, is that if you go straight and follow this river, you will eventually go to the Titicaca Lake. And one of the stories of the Inca Foundation, it's a couple that they emerged from the Titicaca Lake.
Okay.
So that's also one of the reasons why it could be so sacred.
Is that a Quechua myth story, or is it date further back to?
That's a very interesting question because it is Quechua, but it's very mixed with Aymara people. Sometimes you can even find here in Cusco a lot of toponymic names of names of places which have Aymara names or sounds. Like for instance, Llacta for in Quechua, it's like a human organization unit. Like a town, maybe it could be a country, but that is also marca is the same in Aymara. And then you'll find here Ancasmarca and many places that also have that. And the Quechua here, it's called Quechua Collao, and Collao is a region close to the Titicaca Lake in Puno region. And the Quechua here has a lot of sounds that are loaned by the Aymara language. So, and this Quechua is very different to the other Quechuas in terms of sound, mostly from other Quechuas of the country. And so it's a very mixed story. Like even before the Europeans got here, we will still have a history full of mixtures.
Yes.
So I wouldn't say there's purity. I don't think something like that really happens because humans always migrated since they're humans. But yeah, we can find that. We can find those little clues that we can say like, oh, okay, Aymaras were here also. Poquinas were also here, which was another language that people say only the Inca elite will speak or spoke. And even now, I heard stories from people here. There's a place here in Urubamba called Pichingoto, and they say people used to live there in caves. And if you go there, you see like some structures in the mountain. And they say like maybe like 100 years ago, there was still people like living there. They will speak something different, and their ethnic features were different to Quechua people. I've never researched more into that, but I heard especially the old folks they talk about it in those places.
Right. Well, I'm thinking about my studies and travels in Guatemala, where each valley has their own language. They might be related to the next valley and the next valley over, and they also have their own form of weaving that particularly identifies them.
Yeah.
There are, I believe the number is 28 different language types in a small place like Guatemala. Is there something similar that, or maybe back off from the exact comparison, but how do each community differentiate itself? Because I keep hearing, there's some dances that come from Ollantaytambo, there's others that come from Puno, others that come from closer to Cusco. So how are places delineated in that way that create their own special characteristics?
Their identity.
Yeah.
It's beautiful because they do it through many things. First thing is the colors in their traditional clothes. So I learned that here because when you see a red kind of orange color, sometimes they are from Huilloc, Pampallacta, which are the highlands of Ollantaytambo. But if you see more like a crimson red, must be from Chincheros. And if you see a red, but not so crimson, but kind of crimson, must be the highlands of Calca. And even there, like they have their own designs. For instance, in Huilloc, for some reason, they weave a lot the head of Tupac Amaru, which was indigenous leader in a rebellion during the colony. And
Is this the original Tupac Amaru or the second one?
The second one.
Second one.
And they weave a lot that they weave a lot of things, animals that live there. The symbols in Accha Alta, you can also look at them and say like, oh, okay, this is from a different place. And every symbol, so it has to do with a lake that is related with them, a kind of footstep that the animals left, or a kind of flower, or a kind of, once I heard, because most of the symbols are diamonds. So, and the language is based on mostly diamonds and designs based in this shape. And I saw once this and I asked, what does this mean? And in a community, they say, it's our Apu, our mountain reflecting into the lake. And I was like, yeah, I mean, of course. But it's just how they can take this diamond symbol, which I think it means community, but transform it into so many ways that it gets its own identity in each community. And if you add color to that, a different color, it gives more identity. And in top of that, sometimes, young people don't do that now so much, but old people used to weave in their ponchos or the jigjas. Other things that you will say, like what kind of food they were farming. If they were farm potatoes, if they were farm corn, if they were farm habas, and how much. And you can even tell if people were single, were married, were widows. Everything was there in the textiles. I don't know how to read everything, but I do know how to, by the colors, I know where people are from. So that's one level. And even inside, like the communities, I've seen people that, like the weavers, they see a textile and they know who weave it. Like that's the level of, there's so much levels to read there that I cannot read, but obviously they can, and they know how to do it, but they can even know who weave it because of the way. It's beautiful. Now, in terms of the dances, it's very interesting because some of these dances, they are not necessarily original from Urubamba. For instance, herreros, which is blacksmith, I think, it's a dance that is traditionally from Yucay, which is now in risk of disappearing. Kukasaru is also a dance that is traditionally from here. But the other dances comes from other parts of Cusco. And in their original places, they have other colors. So when this dance is adopted by another community from another part of Cusco or another region, they change colors in the costume, or they change a little of details in the mask, so people know that what's the origin of that dance, or the group. What's the origin of the group? So it's very important that they can distinguish. And even inside the dance, sometimes they all have the same color, but if you look into the details, like for instance the montera, which is like the hat most of them have, they have designs on it, and the design is something sometimes very personal. Sometimes they have like very traditional geometric designs. Sometimes they put like a portrait of the Virgin. Sometimes they put a cartoon like Dragon Ball. Sometimes they put everything they want. So it's very personal. So, and if you look also in the chuspa, which is where they live, where they have the coca leaves, also not every chuspa is the same. Sometimes they have their names. So in the little details, you can see, like even in the large view, there's unity, but if you see the little details, you see okay, I know who this guy is. Like I see where he's trying to be different, and that's very welcome.
Yeah, there was a lot of individual little variations on the theme
Mm-hmm.
that were definitely not necessarily traditional, but more personal expression within the tradition.
Yeah, there's a lot of sense of humor also there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so we're talking about hiking up to Coyoriti this weekend. Could you explain what that ceremony is, or that experience is about, what that pilgrimage is about?
Mm-hmm. You know, it has to do with life because we are going to visit our father. We say like we're gonna visit Papa, Taita Coyoriti. And he is live because he's a glacier, and when he melts, he gives water to where when we go up, we go through the Andean part. But if we imagine we will go to the peak and go to the other side, that ice that is melting to the other side eventually goes to the jungle. So that mountain is giving water to the jungle and to the Andean side. That's why there are only two dances that are allowed to go into the glacier. And one of the dances depicts people from the jungle and people from the Andes. And the rest, they stay down there, but these main two, they are allowed to walk into the ice. So I think here in the Andean world, things come in a dual way. So we have day, we have night, we have up, we have down. In this case, we have the mother, which her celebration is in July, August, and the father, which his celebration is now. In between, it's the solstice where the sun is born. So let's say that comes that celebration, baby is being born, then mom's celebration. That's how it starts. That's the end of the. Actually, we could see it like if we're in the end of the Andean year, which is gonna end in June 21. And then in July, we have our very first large celebration, which is Virgen del Carmen. And Virgen del Carmen is blended, is mixed with Pachamama. And after that celebration comes Pachamama month, which is August. So the whole family is there at the end of the year and the beginning of the year.
Is this Urubamba, or is this Cusco, or is this?
This is Cusco, but Cusco region because Coyuriti belongs to the is in between Quispicanchis province and Paucartambo province. Many years ago, it used to be a celebration only from the provinces of Cusco, but Cusco capital will not get mixed there. Only maybe in the last 20, 25 years, Cusco city got mixed and they start like going. And now people from the jungle, they come to dance the dances even from the Andean part, not necessarily the jungle part. And so it's now a really big thing, and it's not every province has its own nation, and it's the way they organize and they go there. So Urubamba has Urubamba Nation, and every dance here in every little town they are gathered in this nation and they go into represented as Urubamba Nation. And the same happens with Paruro Nation, Anta Nation, Canas Nation, and so on. And from other parts of the country, also Arequipa, Puerto Maldonado, Puno. I have some friends that even come from the jungle. They come from Tarapoto. They come from many places. And they organize and they all go there. And one of the reasons they go there because Coyoriti is told that they make things happen. So if you ask for, I don't know, for a truck or a land or to finish your career or your degree or whatever, it will make it happen. So people go there with a lot of faith. And what happens in this celebration also is that when we say Coyoriti, yes, Coyoriti is a very specific glacier, but around Coyoriti there are other sacred parts which sometimes people go because these other parts, because they have a special relationship with, I don't know, like Sinacara, which is another glacier with it, which is like right next to it. or Mama Chapata, which is like more like a feminine area, and that's where all the alacitas, which is like ¿cómo se dice? Like psychomagic, you know, all this little like for it's like a game, it's like a little small game. Actually, this comes from the Aymara culture, where they buy symbolic land and they put their houses there, and it's a way of asking Coyoriti to like, I'm buying my house and this is what I want and please make it happen. So it's like a little game. People even go there to marry, and they marry strangers, and there's a fake priest that marries people, but it's a symbolic way of saying like, this is what I want, and I come here to make it happen, but when I go back I wanted this to happen also there. So this area, there's an area where this happened that is called Mama Chapata, so people are more related to that.
Hey listeners, quick break here. We hope that you're enjoying Eco Justice Radio. Stay connected by subscribing on all major podcast apps. Visit our website at ecojusticeradio.org to check out previous shows and guests, listen to extended episodes, and get connected with us on social media. Today, you are listening to The Music and Traditions of Highland Peru. I'm your host, Jack Ide, and we feature a discussion with Rafo Nunjar Tovar, self-taught musician, composer, sound researcher, and instrument builder. That was Caminos Antiguos by Rafo Nunjar.
Sometimes people go because one of the origins of Coyoriti means star of snow, so or ice, stars of ice.
Star like in Estrella.
Yeah, and this is because one of the origin stories of this is that a meteorite hit that place, and it hit the ice, and the ice just jumped everywhere. That's why it's called star of ice. And the meteorite is inside the church, which it's in the Coyoriti area. So sometimes people go there because of the meteorite, and they go to because they have a relationship with the meteorite. Sometimes they go to the Coyorcocha, which is the lake, which is up, not so up, but in the right there, right below the Coyoriti glacier. So every part has its own characteristics, its own power. People have their own faith to these different places, and sometimes they have more faith into a place than another. So it's like a family of things, of energies happening there.
Isn't there a shape of a rock up there, and forgetting how it was shaped? There was like a vision. I was told you won't be able to see it when everybody's up there, so you'd have to go when no one was there to see the animal in the rock. I'm not remembering it, unfortunately. Maybe you don't know it, but
because of the shadows, that happens in another area. I mean, I know because of this meteorite, like the Catholic Church, they painted Christ there, and
yes, it was the face of.
Yes,
Okay,
and they will
remembering.
construct a whole story, a whole narrative into what happened there. And then they build, and then because people will go to check on the meteorite and to do a lot of rituals around it. And then the Catholic Church, they decided to build a church around it. So they will have to go inside the church to be able to have a relationship with the meteorite. So they will administrate faith, administrate relationships. Um, so that's one of the things. And sometimes people go because of the meteorites. Sometimes people go because of the glaciers. Here in San Salvador, which is Pisac, a little bit more to the south, there is also a church which is Lord of Huanca, and inside Lord of Huanca there's also a meteorite. So this idea of cults on meteorites, it happens in many places. So it's not new, not exclusive from Coyoriti. It happens in many places.
Yeah. Well, it's an amazing cosmology, and it's very complex. For someone who's new here, I just have had sort of wide eyes just trying to take things in and not really knowing exactly what kind of things I've been seeing. I hear a lot of different stories and trying to take it in, and the beauty of it, the singularity of the way of life people. It's very, from an outsider's perspective, yes, I think life is very difficult here and there's a lot of poverty, but there's also a lightness, particularly, well, even in the city, outside of the city, even more so. In a little place like Urubamba here, it just has a nice tone to life. But even with a little heavier, more concentrated dose down in Cusco, there's still a way of a joie de vivre, an attitude and I think that's why this is such a popular tourism destination. I mean, I'm kind of shocked at how popular it is, and I think there's good reasons for that. What do you think about the clash of all this tourism? How do you think that it has affected people in the way in these places?
I think it works in many ways. The first thing I can think of is it affects our self-esteem, maybe in a positive way, and maybe yes, maybe not, because we come from a colony, and in this colony we were taught for 500 years to know that our native cultures, which is cultures because it's wide, it's very diverse. They were, ¿cómo se dice? Atraso.
It's made backwards, suppressed.
Yeah. And I think just at the beginning of this 21st century, that way of looking traditional cultures were slowly moving. Yeah, improving, but slowly. And one of those things that have helped to do that is to have recognition from people from outside. So we're not able to recognize the greatness of our own culture if it's not recognized before for foreigners, visitors. So yeah, that talks about how low our self-esteem, like collective self-esteem, is. But on the other hand, we can see the glass half full and say like, okay, it's helping. In terms of economy, it's also helping. In terms of how accurate we are with our culture and how we try to preserve our culture in their most traditional way and trying not to shape it to the taste of visitors, that's where we have an issue. Because sometimes there are certain things designed for visitors, for tourists, which I understand, but then when that thing is starting to clash with traditional things, with forms of culture that doesn't necessarily have to do with tourism, then because this traditional part, which have needs, we have poverty, we have a lot of issues, and I do understand from that side that has issues to solve, and the government, the state is not a present figure, it's never been a present figure, and people need to fix it somehow. How they switch, soften, westernize certain things so it could be objects of consume for the Western culture. I understand where that comes from, and that's not necessarily something bad if we can separate things. So if we can create things for this kind of, let's say, market, but we have to make it different for the traditional things. because the traditional things, they don't they are not born for a logic market. They are not born for buying and sell. They are born out of relationships. They are born out of gratitude or needs or love or respect or many human emotions, that the main purpose of that is not buying or selling. That's one of the beautiful things in Coiriti. There's a lot of commerce there. There's a lot of food being sold, a lot of little things, soups, because that's a need. But the main purpose is just to celebrate faith, culture, relationships, grateful, and that doesn't have a price. That's still, and you are not gonna find a large amount of tourism. I would say like maybe 2% of people, even less than that, it's tourist, because it's not comfortable, it's cold, there are no, yeah, I mean, it's not clean, let's be honest. People try to do their thing, but we have an issue with that. So there is not prepared, it's not meant to fulfill this market needs. But because of that, there's a beauty on it. Maybe even because all these defects or these flaws are there, that's the way of defend itself from this other perspective, this other culture. So I wouldn't say there is everything is bad, like tourism is bad or is 100% good. What I feel what we are, our lack of self-esteem and recognition with our own culture doesn't allow us to be protectful enough with the manifestations of our own culture. So we just sell it, or we just adapt things so it will be tasteful for the big market. And we do that because most of the people who does this, they don't understand the depth of the knowledge, the wisdom, the relationships on it. So I think it can zoom to, we just don't, people don't know it sometimes. They ignore how deep this goes. And that's why they just wrap it and sell it as like if it was, I don't know, some craft.
Yeah. I think that there's dangers in terms of things become expensive, like land, when certain communities become overwhelmed, like what's happened to Pisac, for instance. There's like,
Yeah, the Pisac thing.
you got to meet folks from Pisac and understand there's another layer, and there's of course the ruins there, which are incredible, but there's this culture there of sort of an extreme tourism. It's not even like the straight ahead tourism that you get for the Machu Picchu crowd. It's like
It's very
it's a subculture of hippie drogistas and other people. It's an interesting thing. It's good. It's not good. It could be bad, but it's a beautiful little place, and there's a lot of good people there. But it's an interesting mix that I've seen in other places happen too, and that's a bit problematic when there's a lot of traditional ways of being there that could potentially be exploited. So I guess it's a cautionary tale of, the economy. There's a lot of money around that it helps people in a way, but places like Urubamba that has a little bit of tourism, but it's embedded. It's almost not even visible in a way. And I mean, that to me is, in my taste, is much more of a place I would rather be in, but it's a little harder to be in for your average tourist, so they probably wouldn't want to come here too much. But whereas Cusco, has a lot of services, a lot of luxury stuff, a lot of opportunities for all kinds of people to come to. And I think that's also important for here. And the popularity of Machu Picchu, it could be controversial, but it's also a good thing, because there's a lot of people who love Peru. And maybe they don't know the Peru that you know, but they know something, which is good too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there's a lot of gray areas, and nothing is entirely bad or good. It's a complex situation. Yeah, Pisac, for instance, used to be a very small traditional town with a lot of archaeological sites and a lot of traditional dances and music that are pretty much gone now. And and I think one of the things this Pisac is like this right now is because sometimes people go from other parts of the country or other parts of the world with a lot of emotional needs, and they have this idea, sometimes a good idea, sometimes a bad idea, that they can find a solution with for that emotional issues they have. One of the reasons why that has happened is because of the ayahuasca spots around Pisac. Taray, mostly 2 or 3 persons that opened this up maybe 20 years ago, and that started like raising the interest of people in this kind of context, rituals, which I have to say, like, I was part of that many years ago, and I know that word. And maybe when it was in the kind of just a handful of people, 5 persons, 4 persons, it was okay. But then it just got out of hand, and people come here and they wanna heal their issues, and sometimes they find responsible people, sometimes they find whatever, and so it just an ecosystem is created, you know.
So I'm familiar with this more from Iquitos,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also communities here, you're saying, that for the ayahuasca.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people live here, and I know a lot of people who were just passing by and they just stay here for many years, and they fall in love with the culture and the history and the archaeological sites and amazing. I think I mean, everybody has the right to heal, but are we being responsible? That's the thing. And responsibility has to do with culture, economics, how we impact in the traditional community we're arriving, if we're being part of a community, or we're trying to impose our foreigner ways of living into the community where we are arriving. Are we even having spaces for talking with them? Or it's just like the ways we consume, we just buy to local people and we take services and nothing else. Like, I feel now, I saw in a Facebook group like people from Pisac that they will create a guide thinking about this province. So giving a guide to people to say, like, if you come here and you're planning to stay longer, maybe you will have to take these reasons in mind. How you relate, how much you pay, how you impact if you buy land here, what kind of neighbor you are, etc., etc., etc. So I think, and also in some of the communities, they do have ways of protecting themselves. For instance, up in the highlands of Pisac, people from other places are buying land, and people from the highlands are seeing what's happening down here, and there's a kind of steps that you have to do. Like, for instance, you don't buy directly. First, you have to be a neighbor, so the community can see which kind of neighbor you are. Then you pass a number of years, and you go and you start like doing this community work with the community. Like cleaning the channels of water and things like that. And then you are allowed to buy some land. So I believe from many parts, people are thinking about how is this a problem and how is this affecting everybody and what could be the possible solution. So yeah, I mean, some years some decades have happened, have passed, and people are seeing the consequences of this, but they just don't want to do it like this. Sometimes they do because, money can be very seductive, but they see like sometimes they sell to someone who's not a good neighbor, and maybe in 10, 20 years they're gone, but their kids or their grandkids are still gonna be there, and because of that decision they are going to be the ones who are gonna carry the consequences of that decision. So yeah, people are thinking about it.
Yeah, it's important. I mean, we have what we call gentrification.
Gentrification, yeah.
In Los Angeles, and there's, neighborhoods that have been a certain way for generations. When there's another crowd that decides that's where they want to live, and everything changes, unless there are some specific requirements that protect the residents, protect the place, and protect the culture. So, but that's a really important consideration, I think, particularly when tourism becomes so popular in certain places because of the beautiful place and all the good things about it. I've seen that happen in a lot of places like Costa Rica and Mexico, the whole Cancun, the whole coast down there in Mexico starts off with an idea of something and some beauty and whatever.
Yeah. My cousin who was just here when you got here, she used to live in Miami. She lives now here in Urubamba, but she was living in Little Jamaica, which was a Jamaican neighborhood many years ago, which now is gentrified. None of her neighbors back in 20 years that lived there live now. Yeah. So gentrification happens everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's a problem everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sitting down for so long. We've gone a little over, and I appreciate you giving me a little extra more time and just all the knowledge that you've shared with us today, and the work that you're doing and the music. We didn't get too deeply into the actual museum, but that's another investigation.
Yeah, we can do that some other day.
Yeah. But anyways, thank you for talking about this.
Thanks to you for coming here and for allowing me to speak my mind also, and to tell all of these stories that I've heard over the years here and in many other parts of our country. It's just what I can say is just that it's overwhelming once you start knowing how things work and how they are intertwined. It's just beautiful and overwhelming at the same time. So I'm very grateful that I can share this. I'm very grateful that I live here, that I have this space, that we have water, we have sun, we have all this food, all this celebration, that we're still alive. Yeah, I'm very grateful for you.
Here's to that.
Thank you to Rafo Nunjar, and thank you to our listeners for joining us. This has been the music and traditions of Highland Peru. For an extended version of this show, become a member of our Patreon or visit our website at ecojusticeradio.org. My name is Jack Ait, coming to you from multiple undisclosed locations under a bank of Keonia trees next to a flowing stream that originates from deep underground. Please connect with us on social media at EcoJustice Radio, SoCal 350, and Wilder Utopia. If you like what you've heard, you want others to be informed, subscribe and share the episodes. Project of SoCal 350. This show can be found on all major podcast apps and at ecojusticeradio.org. Executive producer and host, myself, Jack Ait, co-host Gary Kim, engineer Blake Quake Beats, and original music by myself and Blake Quake Beats. And we encourage everyone to get your mind and yourself out into the wild.